Trump could be overperforming the polls yet again. Hello everyone, welcome to Politics Enhanced, and thank you all so much for clicking on today's video. Today we're going to talk about the polling errors, and specifically we're going to talk about what the map would look like if the 2020 polling errors were applied to the 2024 current polling. We're just a few days out from election day, folks, so without further ado, we're going to go through all of the swing states on this map here, and we're going to see who exactly would win if the 2020 margin of error is applied to 2024. So first of all, folks, I want to start off in the state of Arizona, because Arizona is a state that's absolutely crucial for Donald Trump. Biden only won it by 10,000 votes, and as we can see in the state of Arizona, Donald Trump currently boasts a 1.5% lead, which is very good for his chances of election. Now, if we go to the 2020 polling, we see that Biden led on election day by roughly 1%, yet he only won the state by 0.3%, which means that they overestimated the Democrats by 0.6%. So if we apply that margin of error, that means that Donald Trump would win the state of Arizona by 2.1%. or barely a lean margin. Next, we're going to talk about the state of Nevada, because Nevada is also a very important state. We're going to go west to east, folks. And as you can see, right now, Donald Trump has a lead of 0.7% in Nevada. He's doing good with minority voters. He's doing good with Hispanic voters in particular. He's doing better with white suburban voters. All of this plays a role in delivering him the victory in 2024. But let's look at 2020. As we can see, the polling absolutely nailed it back in 2020. It was exactly right, and it predicted that Biden would win by 2.4, and Biden ended up winning by 2.4. So with this in mind, we can confidently say that there would be no change in the polling and that Donald Trump would win the state of Nevada by less than 1%. So the map is already filling in, and we only have a few of the crucial states left to go. But these are the western states filled in. And now we're going to move east to the most important battleground states, starting off with Wisconsin, because Wisconsin is a crucial state. If Donald Trump loses Wisconsin, he's in serious trouble, because he's probably not going to win Michigan. He's also probably not going to win Pennsylvania, because they're all in sync when they vote. So Wisconsin is the most conservative of the Rust Belt trio. So this is also a must win for Donald Trump. Now, if we go back to 2020, we see that Biden was overestimated. The Democrats were overestimated by 6%. So if we look at the map, that means Donald Trump would win Wisconsin by 6.7, almost 7%. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but again, this is just applying the polling error from 2020 to the 2024 map. Our next state on the list would be the state of Minnesota, which is a state that Republicans, especially Donald Trump, have been eyeing this cycle, but in previous cycles as well. And we see right now that Kamala Harris has a 4.3% lead in the state of Minnesota, which isn't very good for a Democrat, first of all. But second of all, if you look back to 2020 and 2016, Biden won it by 7, Clinton won by 1.5%. And if we look at the 2020 polling, we saw Biden beat Trump by over 7 points in the state of Minnesota. So what this means is that Democrats were underestimated by 3%. So if we apply this back to 2024, we could say that Harris would probably win the state of Minnesota by a likely margin, 7 to 8 points. Next, we're going to look at the state of Michigan, because Michigan is another crucial battleground state, and it is extremely close. It's going down the wire. I mean, it is anybody's game. Michigan could be one of the deciding states ultimately, but as we can see, Trump has a 0.1% lead in the state of Michigan. If we look in 2020, Biden had a 4.2% lead, yet he was overestimated by 1.4%. So if we apply that to 2024, that would mean that Donald Trump would take the state of Michigan by 1.5%. He would win it by over 1%, which would be pretty unprecedented for a Republican to do, and it would be the second time in the last 3 elections that a Republican has won Michigan. But that would be quite impressive if Trump could do that, because I think Michigan is going to be one of the closest states. Even though Harris isn't looking good in Michigan, you do have a lot of voters there who are going to vote for her regardless. But you also have a lot of Trump support, so it's anybody's game in the state of Michigan. Next, we're going to talk about Pennsylvania, another very important battleground state. And as we can see, in the state of Pennsylvania, Donald Trump holds a 0.5% lead over Kamala Harris, which is very good at this point in the election. And it's been neck and neck between the two. Donald Trump has had a very good field operation in the state of Pennsylvania. He's getting the Amish to vote. He's getting rural voters to come out. He's spending lots of money in the state, because if you win Pennsylvania, you're likely going to the White House for 4 years. And he knows it. We know it. Everybody in the world knows it. When you look at the map, though, even back in 2020, we see that Biden led by 1.2%, but he won the state by 1.2%. So this was an unusual circumstance where the polling was actually accurate for the Democrats. It was spot on, which means that if current polling holds up, then Donald Trump would win the state of Pennsylvania by 0.5%, which would also be an impressive margin of victory. It wouldn't be as big as Biden's margin, but it would put him over the finish line, and it would get him currently to 280 electoral votes. But our map isn't finished. We still have a few states left to go, and our next state is going to be the state of Virginia. So looking at Virginia, we see right now that Harris has a 6-point lead over Donald Trump in the state of Virginia, and she's not at 50%, which isn't necessarily the best place that you want to be, especially as a Democrat. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is going to win Virginia. In fact, I'm quite skeptical of that. I think he's campaigning there because he wants to get those competitive congressional seats so that he can solidify a majority if he wins the presidency. However, I do think it's important to note that back in 2020, the polling did overestimate Democrats by about 2 to 3%. So if we look at the map and we say, okay, Kamala Harris is up 6 points and they're overestimating Democrats by 2 to 3, you could see Virginia be a 3-point win for Harris. I'm not saying it's going to flip to Donald Trump. I think that is kind of a pipe dream when you look at the early vote data and everything coming in right now. But it certainly could get a whole lot closer, especially this election cycle. And in the future, Virginia could be turning a corner and it could be winnable for Republicans, maybe in the 2030s or 2040s. But for now, I think it's going to trend to the right. And that leaves us with North Carolina and Georgia. And specifically, when we look at North Carolina, we see that Donald Trump has a 0.8% lead in the state of North Carolina. Now, this lead in North Carolina is quite small. However, this is the one state that Donald Trump was able to hold on to back in 2020, the one swing state that went to Donald Trump over Joe Biden. And if we look back in 2020, we see that Trump had an even smaller lead in the polling, yet he ended up winning the state by over 1%, meaning that the polls in 2020 underestimated Republicans by 1.1%. Now, if we apply this to the current map, that would mean that Donald Trump would win the state of North Carolina by 3%, which would be a very comfortable margin for Donald Trump. And those 16 electoral votes certainly are going to help him out on election night. And that leaves us finally with the state of Georgia. And Georgia is going to be an interesting state because right now Donald Trump has a 2.3% lead in the polling aggregate, which is very good, especially for a Republican, especially for it being a swing state. Although Georgia does have a very conservative past, it has trended more blue in recent years. But we also see in 2016, Trump had a 2.5% lead in the state of Georgia, but he ended up winning it by 5%. Now in 2020, Biden did end up flipping the state of Georgia by 0.3%. And if we look at the polling from 2020, Donald Trump was actually up in the polls by 1, yet Biden did win by 0.3%. So that would mean that the polls overestimated Republicans by 1.3%. So if we apply this margin of error to our map, that would mean that Donald Trump would win the state of Georgia by 1%. Again, this is not a prediction. This is just the polling errors from 2020 applied to the current polling of 2024. And we're very close to the election. So I thought I'd make this video, and I don't think this is the margin that we're going to see on election night. I think Arizona is probably going to be closer than Wisconsin, but I do think North Carolina will be a 3 to 5 point victory for Donald Trump. I do see it being to the right of Georgia. I don't see Michigan being to the right of Georgia. So I think the polling is very wishy-washy, and obviously we've learned from past election cycles that you can't really trust the polling. The only proven method that works is to get out and vote, and we know that Trump has a lot of supporters who are definitely more under the radar. I like to call them the unlikely voter because they usually don't vote in elections, but they'll come out for Donald Trump. And people might comment down below and say, oh, but 2022, the Republicans were expected to win, but they didn't. Well, that argument has a lot of flaws because even in the national popular vote, Republicans were underestimated. They've always been underestimated in the popular vote, especially Donald Trump now. He's currently, at the time of this recording, leading the popular vote by 0.1 or 0.2%. And it just goes to show that, we'll see after this cycle how accurate the polls really are, if they've gotten better, if they've gotten worse, if it's a 2016 2.0. But again, this is the polling error from 2020 applied to 2024. This is not a prediction. But thank you all for watching and have a great day. Get out and vote. Let's make this map happen, folks. Politics Enhanced out.